And thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, and here we are. That's what I really wanted to say at the beginning. Here we are, the end of the NBA season. Boston Celtics, they are NBA champions once again. This was on the anniversary of the most recent time that they won the NBA Finals all the way back in 2008. And much like the finals in 2008, it ended in a similar fashion in a blowout win. So we're going to talk a little bit about this specific game. Then in the second segment, we're actually going to talk a little bit about all the games and give just my opinions on the finals, what I think about them, whether I had fun watching them, whether I didn't, what I thought about some of the players, things of that nature. Then in the third segment, we are going to be talking about what could be next for the Dallas Mavericks after losing in the NBA Finals. Obviously, you don't want to be the team that ends up losing when you make it all the way and you ultimately just end up choking. Well, not really choking, but you ultimately end up losing in the end. It's always sort of like draining because it's like you put all of that time and all that out and all those hours, all that sweat, all that grind into the game and into winning, and you just mess up at the very last second. And it was similar to what the Celtics did and how they've overcome that sort of like similar thing. So we're just gonna talk a little bit about what's next for Dallas. Then in the fourth segment, we are going to be asking the question if Jason Tatum was robbed of Finals MVP or if it was definitely like deserved for Jaylen Brown, who ended up winning the Finals MVP. And we also have a special fifth segment that I like to reveal at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned all the way up until the fourth segment to see exactly what that segment is going to be. But before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCPodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCPodcast.net. And let's go right ahead and talk about this game 5, this final matchup between the Celtics and the Mavericks, the final game of the season, the closeout game, whatever you want to call it. So the Mavericks, they ended up getting blown out of the water again, 106-88. And again, this Celtics team just showed the Mavericks why they were just the better team all series. This game was never close. From the start of the game all the way to the end of the game, it was never close, similar to every other game in the series. Jaylen Brown, your Finals MVP, and also your Eastern Conference Finals MVP, ended the game with 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists, but he wasn't the real hero. Jason Tatum, oops, not that guy. Actually, you know what? Yeah, Kyrie is the real hero for the Boston Celtics. Why? Because he was atrocious throughout the entire series. He's your hero, Boston. He ended the game with 15 points, 3 rebounds, and 9 assists. And with a putrid shooting performance in the entirety of the finals and a putrid shooting performance to close out the series as well, he shot 5 for 16 in this final game. And in almost every single game that he's played in, he ended up taking more shot attempts than points scored. This was a horrible performance from Kyrie Irving, and this finals as a whole has been a horrible performance for Kyrie. Now, obviously, I accidentally said that he was the reason why the Celtics won, but in reality, it was this man who was the hero of the Boston Celtics, Jason Tatum. He ended the game 31 points, 8 rebounds, and 11 assists, while also shooting, 11 for 24 from the field. He shot 1 for 7 from 3, but, it doesn't matter because he ended the game with 31 and 11. That is a very, very good closeout game, and after being very inconsistent throughout the majority of the series, he was able to show up when they desperately needed him. And there's not really much more that needs to be said about this performance other than, it's about time that he had a good performance like this. And unfortunately for him, this wasn't rewarded. This performance wasn't enough to give him the Finals MVP, despite the fact that this, performance, it really boosted his stats. I'll talk a little bit more about that, in the fourth segment and probably, a little bit of the second segment, but this performance, it was really close, and it made the finals MVP discussion a little bit more competitive, because if you remember, throughout a majority of the series, I was saying, that Jaylen Brown was clear cut going to be the finals MVP. It didn't matter. And I also didn't mention Luka Doncic. Luka, he ended the game with 28 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 assists. Again, another great performance from Luka, but it was all for nothing because his team and his teammates, they just didn't show up, and they failed to show up with the game in the balance, like they've done every single game in this entire series. Josh Green, he ended the game 5 for 8. He was the only other, really important piece to the Dallas Mavericks. And it's like this team that's very isolation heavy, and, well, not really isolation heavy, but it's very, ball dominant, where it's like you need two players on the team to constantly perform. It's not ideal to winning the championship. The Houston Rockets, they tried it before without having much defense, and it failed miserably for them when they went up against a team similar to the Boston Celtics in the Golden State Warriors back in 2018 that had a loaded squad full of players that could provide offenses for you and for your squad. This two-person basketball, it wasn't going to work against this team basketball, because if you remember, throughout a majority of the season, I'm just going to put Jaylen Brown's averages up here since he is the finals MVP, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few seconds. But if you notice, throughout a majority of the series, it wasn't Jason Tatum's having a great game, or it was always Jaylen Brown was having a great game. Like, Jaylen Brown, he always seemed to have a great game in every single win other than game 5, he's had a great game in every single one of those wins. In every single one of those 3 games, he's played phenomenally. But on top of Jaylen Brown playing phenomenally, there was also Kristaps Porzingis that played great in game 1. Drew Holiday that played great in game 2, and then Tatum that played great in game 3. So it was a whole team effort, more so than it was just, two players on one team taking all of the shots. And that was the big difference maker and why the Celtics were ultimately able to win. Because while they were running a very similar offensive scheme, where they had two ball handlers, two primary ball handlers. They run a pick and roll. They run a 5-out spacing, whatever you want to call it. But essentially, it's the two main ball handlers, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, doing most of the work. Similar to how with Dallas, it's Kyrie and Luka doing most of the work. The difference between the Celtics and Dallas is that the Celtics, they already have their set, primary ball handlers and their set pieces on the offenses, their number 1 and their number 2 option. It's not like the other players on the team can't do more with the ball. That's the problem that the Dallas Mavericks were sort of experiencing when going up against the Celtics. It's the fact that the Celtics, they had multiple options to run the offense, and they had multiple scoring options at their disposal that they could use. And it's not like if you made sure that Tatum never touched the ball, that wouldn't determine whether or not the Celtics would score or not. The Celtics would most likely still score. Compared to how if it was on Dallas, if you prevent Luka from touching the ball, chances are the Dallas Mavericks aren't going to be able to score. Or if you prevent both Luka and Kyrie from touching the ball, the Mavericks weren't going to score. You can't do that against the Celtics. It's a completely different ball game. And there is someone in the chat. If the Mavs had even one more offensive weapon, even part-time, Dallas wins this series. I think Hardaway Jr. was underutilized. I think you're just dead wrong. I understand that, yes, if Tim Hardaway was there, the series would have been much more competitive without a doubt. But I think you're just wrong, because that's undermining the Celtics and their defense and just how good of a defensive team they really are. I mean, they weren't able to stop Luka, but they were able to stop Kyrie. And if they're able to stop Kyrie, you really think they're not going to be able to stop Tim Hardaway Jr.? Come on. It's no contest. Kyrie, you could argue that maybe Kyrie was missing a lot of shots, but at the same time, when have we seen him? I mean, we've seen him play like this bad only against, the Celtics. And while you could make the argument that it's like, well, since he played for the Celtics, they know his game better than anyone. You could also argue that like if you like guarding Kyrie is one of the most difficult players to guard. And the fact that they were able to slow him down just enough like to make him a non-factor and blow out the Celtics in every single game is nothing short of impressive. And I feel like you're undermining that. You can't stop Kyrie, Doncic, and player X at the same time. They just did. They just stopped they stopped Kyrie and they stopped Doncic. Well, they didn't really stop Doncic, but they stopped Kyrie, and that was really the only thing that you needed. Like, obviously, the Mavericks, they weren't going to win without the production from both of them. All you needed to do was slow down one. All you needed to do was slow down one of those options, and the chances of you winning the series were going to be higher than if you were to not stop if you were to just not stop either of them. And most of these wins that the Dallas Mavericks have had throughout all of the postseason has been when Kyrie and Luka perform. So all you have to do is slow one of them down just a little bit, and you win the series. Now, obviously, it's easier said than done. With all due respect to Kyrie, and there's a lot more in the comments. Doncic dominated the postseason, even with double and triple teams. The third shooter opens up the court for him. He shot horribly in this postseason, and I was going to bring it up, and I was going to bring it up just a little bit later in the third segment, but you're almost making me bring it up now. But Luka shot very, very poorly, and it's like they weren't going to do anything. But like, I understand, like, because he does have a lot more in the comments, and Boston has great defense and a deep bench. Exactly. They weren't going to, even if they had a third option playing, that third option, it wasn't going to be enough. It just wasn't. This Celtics team is a, you know what? I'll go into the next segment and I'll talk a little bit about that, because we are running out of time in this first segment. I'll go ahead and bring up some of the stats, and I might change the order of the segments, because now this is actually worth discussing. So I might go ahead and go talk about what's next for Dallas in the second segment, as opposed to talking about how this finals was rather boring, because this is actually worth discussing. So I'm going to answer all of those comments that you have in the comment section right after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we're going to do two things. We are going to, one, talk about the finals and whether, like, my opinions on the finals. And two, I'm also going to answer, the rest of the questions that are in the comments, because, this is a pretty good discussion, and he's making some good points, but I just disagree with them completely, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about why. And before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead, use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is gsmcpodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and get into this next segment, which is going to be talking about the finals as a whole. So I'm just going to get it right out of the way. I thought the entire finals and I thought this entire series was just boring. Like, before I answer your question in the comments, I just want to like point this out just a little bit. I mean, this was game 1, 107-89. Then this was game 2. Then this was game 3. Let me just go ahead and find game 4. Here was game 4, and game 5 was here. So if you notice, every like Celtics 107-89, Celtics 105-98, Celtics 106-99. And it's like every single one of these games, Celtics, they ended up losing, but the Mavericks, they ended up winning 122-84 and then 106-88. It seems like every single one of these games was a blowout. And every single one of these games was like almost decided right from the jump. And I can't help but feel like that is just ridiculously boring. Like the Celtics seem to be, every single game was a blowout, not just game 4. I'm answering the question in the comments. Every single one of these games was a blowout. You could tell who was going to win the final game the second it was going out. Like this final series was very, very boring. So now that I got that out of the way, I might as well go ahead and just answer these questions in the comments, because there is a lot of them, and it's discussing, like, the main premise is, like, you know, if Luka Doncic and if Luka and Kyrie, if they had another piece of the puzzle, they would have ended up beating this Celtics team. And I don't think that's true, like, whatsoever. In my personal opinion, I don't think that's true at all. Like, I do understand that it's like, you know, if you have multiple options on the team, and if you have, like, you know, other scoring options, it makes your life a lot easier. But I just don't agree that if you take, obviously, Luka was incredibly dominant throughout the entirety of the postseason. I'm not saying that he wasn't. That is not what I'm arguing here. But what I am arguing is that I don't really think it would have mattered what other player stepped up in this series. The result still would have ended up being the same regardless. Like, Luka in the postseason, he was great, but it doesn't matter whether or not you're great, like, if your team isn't going to just help you. Now, I understand having a third option, it might help you, but I don't think it would have. I genuinely don't. Not if, you know, because then there would be the problem of sharing the ball. Because if he does have a third option on the team, Luka wouldn't be getting these kinds of options. Like, Luka wouldn't be getting the amount of shot attempts that he would usually get in these games. Therefore, he wouldn't be producing these kinds of numbers in every single game. Because while the numbers, like points, rebounds, and assists, they are impressive, the field goal and the shooting percentages are horrible. They're really bad. And if you minimize the amount of shot attempts that he takes by giving him another option, he's not going to produce as much points at an efficient rate because he's shooting so inefficiently. The same thing goes for Kyrie Irving over in this, because, like, and look at him. His numbers were horrible throughout the entirety of the postseason. He wasn't helping anyone on the team. And it's like, his performance could have been, like, all you needed was a good Kyrie Irving. That's literally all you needed, and the series would have been a little bit more competitive. And they just didn't get that from Kyrie in a single one of these games. Most of Luka Doncic's points that were scored, like, you know, in these averages, they were when the team was down. And, you know, essentially garbage time. Because, you know, when the team is down by so much, it's usually garbage time. I'm not discrediting his numbers. I'm just saying that they would look a little bit different if he had another option on the team. And really, Kyrie Irving needed to step up in a much bigger way than he did in this game. And it was, and not in this game, but, like, you know, in this series as a whole. And wouldn't he be getting better looks, though? Kyrie got fantastic looks, and he was still missing. And no, I don't think that would have changed whether or not he would have gotten any better looks. Because, let's face it, who on the Celtics team is going to leave Luka Doncic wide open, regardless of how many good players are on that team? Nobody is going to give Luka an inch of room. Nobody is going to try to do that. Luka has to work for all of his buckets. Same thing with Kyrie. They aren't going to just leave them if they have a third scoring option on the team. That's just not how it works, and that's like you're up against, like, this was a very similar offense to how Cleveland ended up what's it called? This was the same option when Cleveland sort of ended up going up against Golden State in the finals. It was two players trying to fight against the tide of going up against an incredibly good team. And even when those two players were performing at a historic rate, the other players on the team failed to shine when the light failed to show up when the light shined the brightest. So even if they had a third option, it wouldn't have mattered, because like the team needs to be that third option. Like, the entire team as a whole needs to be that third option, and you aren't going to win just by adding one other star to the offense. But that's just me. Again, you could have like, if you really think that they're just as good as they are, and like if Kyrie actually would have played like how he normally would play, then maybe not every single one of these games would have been a blowout. But that's just me. Now, I mean, and that was part of honestly, this was part of the reason why the finals was so boring. Like, I expected at least like a few Kyrie Irving like legacy games that were coming out of this series, because he's very accustomed to having these legacy games in a lot of these series. I mean, in the finals in 2016, he ended up having 41 points in a game. He also shot the game winner. Even when he was losing in the postseason, when he was going up against the Celtics for all the way back in 2022, they were like Kyrie in game 1, he ended up scoring like 39 points or something like that, and that was a really dominant performance coming in from him. He lost, but I was expecting a dominant performance in front of the Celtics home crowd from Kyrie, and we just didn't get that from him. Not to mention the fact that the rest of the Dallas Mavericks, they didn't seem to want to fight back at all in this series when going up against Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and the Boston Celtics. It really it just seemed like it was just boring. Like, that's really what it was. Like, every single game was just a blowout. It was similar to it was very similar. Like, this was arguably the most boring finals since LeBron versus the Warriors, because it seemed like the KD Warriors, I should say, because every single time that the Warriors would, the only difference between the only reason why that series was not as boring is because Kyrie and LeBron were going ridiculous. And even in 2018, LeBron was going ridiculous, and not only that, the rest of the team, but the games were much more close, and they were a lot closer than this series, where it's like every single game is just it's a blowout. And I'm just scrolling through, going all the way up to the beginning. Again, 107-89, that was the first game. Then in the next game it was 105-98. The score, obviously this wouldn't be considered a blowout, but the score was it was a wide margin of victory. And then in the next matchup, again, it wasn't really, you wouldn't really call it a blowout, but it was another wide margin of victory. And the game was basically decided from, the only reason why it was really even close was because the Celtics were about to choke this game. And the game was really decided from the jump. Not a single game came down to the wire in this series. Not a single one of these games. And then the closeout game, don't even get me started on the closeout game. It literally just looked like the Dallas Mavericks were already happy with not getting swept. And that is what ultimately killed the mood for me. Not only that, the media hyped this finals up way, way too much. I understand we're going a little bit over the segment's time limit, but still, this has to be mentioned. This finals was way, way overhyped by the media. And it's you could already see all the narratives are changing. I mean, everyone now, before people were calling Luka and Kyrie the best backcourt duo that the NBA has seen in a very long time. Now they're saying, oh, if they would have played the Denver Nuggets, it would have been a better matchup. Oh, if the Celtics would have played the Timberwolves, it would have been a better matchup. Like, they're saying all of these things and completely changing the narrative of what it was and like what the series and what the playoffs really were. Like, it's just a complete narrative change. And it's like, they went from, and everyone was picking Dallas to winning this game, despite the fact that the Celtics were the favorites. And one of the biggest pedals to, like, you know, Mavericks being the favorites were because the Mavericks didn't play a team that was injured. Are we serious? Like, the Celtics, they got tremendous amount of slack cut for them, or not really slack, but they got scrutinized tremendously because of the fact that they didn't play a single healthy team, even though, regardless whether the Miami Heat were healthy, regardless whether the Cavs were healthy, regardless whether the Pacers were healthy, the Celtics were going to beat them regardless. I'm sorry to burst everyone's bubble, and I am not a Celtics fan. I cannot stand the Celtics, but the only team, I've said this from the beginning, the only team that I thought could beat the Boston Celtics while they were healthy was the New York Knicks. That was the only team I thought. And like, they got clowned for making it all the way based off of like the teams getting injured, but it wouldn't have even mattered like at that time. Like, it made it easier for them, that's for sure. Yes, it definitely made them easier, but I don't think it would have mattered. Like, regardless whether the series was won in 6 games or whether it was won in 4, regardless, the Celtics were going to win all of those playoff series. And going into the finals, you know, everyone thought, oh, this is going to be very competitive because this is going to be the first time the Celtics are playing against a healthy team, when in reality, like, the Celtics team is just that good. They did not get any recognition for being that good. They never got any of that in the postseason. And I feel like that really played into the fact that the team just wasn't or like the series just wasn't it, because everyone was expecting the series to be a little bit more competitive. Everyone was expecting the Celtics to just, like, you know, be a little, like, I don't know, maybe like timid or scared, or maybe make the series, like, everyone thought that Dallas was going to make this series competitive because solely because they weren't an injured team, which makes 0 sense to me, because the Celtics realistically had every single piece in the book to a championship team, and they weren't getting any kind of credit for it. So and not only that, now the media is just, they're changing their opinions. I cannot stand this whatsoever. And it's like, this Celtics roster is probably one of the best rosters since the 2017-18 Golden State Warriors. And they're all under contract next season. So this is going to be crazy. Like, it's really, really going to be, they're going to most likely run it back. I wouldn't be surprised if they run it back. And this team, it's just been, they're just the better team. It's that simple. And it's like, I really cannot believe that that everyone was banking on the Dallas Mavericks in this series when they were clear cut, just the better team as a whole. Dre in the chat, he's saying, I agree. Thank you, Dre. Thank you for showing up in the chat. So with that, we are out of time for this second segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the third segment, where I talk a little bit about what's next for Dallas, because, you know, there's still a lot of questions. Obviously, we know the Celtics are going to run it back, but should Dallas run it back? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that after this second segment, or like after this break, my bad. So be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, Now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be talking about what is next for the Dallas Mavericks and where they should go, what they should do, what should be the next move for them, this, that, and the other, everything that you need to know, everything that you know that needs to be said. And obviously, I mean, like, if you are, I think, the basic thing to do when you make it all the way to the finals is to try and run it back again. Like, just try. Get a little bit better, but you got to run it back again, especially with these, two players. Now, I wouldn't really say they were missing another piece. I personally think they just needed the team to respond, and the team just wasn't responding. I feel like maybe the nerves of being in the finals for the first time in most of their careers was getting to a lot of the players. And not to mention the Celtics roster as a whole is just, it's just ridiculously strong. And again, it's literally I think it's one of the best rosters since the 2017 and 2018 Warriors. Now, I didn't say that before because I needed them to win a championship just to be sure. Because it's like we've seen the story from the Celtics year in and year out with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and here is the final. This is the first time that they ended up winning the title. So this is by far one of the best rosters that we've seen since the Golden State Warriors. And now just looking through this article, and because obviously they still have to go through free agency, they still have to worry about salary cap, because Luka and Kyrie, they're most likely going to demand a lot of money. And will that give them enough options and enough space to sign new players? We'll see. So Dallas, they reached the finals for the first time in 13 years, and while they ended off on a sour note, they ended up beating the Clippers, the Thunder, and the Timberwolves, and they entered the finals as underdogs to the Boston Celtics, and they ended up winning the series in 5. But there is obviously a bright side. Dallas can easily run it back in 2024 and 2025 behind Luka and Kyrie and several other key players still under contract. While changes may be coming, the Mavs certainly don't need a makeover in the summer, at least according to the article. Now, one of the issues is salary cap. While the Mavericks are limited in ability to make any big moves in free agency because of salary cap, they don't need to make any big moves, really. Dallas already has 13 players under contract for next season. The combined total due is $174.9 million, which is just above the projected $172 million luxury tax. As a result, the Mavs should still be able to bring in a free agent with the $5.2 million taxpayer mid-level exception. Now, that's not really going to move the ball much, for the team, but regardless, the problems with this team wasn't the fact that they didn't have enough stars. It's the fact that they didn't have enough team basketball being played, I guess you could say. Because in my personal opinion, that offensive scheme, unless your role players are going to be as consistent as Steph Curry and Klay Thompson from the field, you are not going to be able to run that systematic offense as efficiently as you want and win a title while doing it, because you are reliant on a lot of factors. You're reliant on your individual players being able to score on whoever is guarding them. You're also relying on your role players to know where to be at. You're also on your role players to hit your shots, on your main player to predict and read the defense. All of these factors are sort of being played in, and it's like, not to mention all the pressure being put on, the one or the two ball handlers that you have on your team. And just forcing Luka and forcing Kyrie to do God knows what with the ball every single possession is not only incredibly difficult to maintain for a long period of time, it's also inefficient. Like, it could end up being inefficient for them, and it could end up putting a lot of pressure on them, not to mention the fact that it could also be just more detrimental to the team, because it's like, you need those two players to play well. It's not like, other players would be able to get into a rhythm, because the whole offense flows within those two players. And you need to get a lot more team basketball going on. It can't be that the Dallas Mavericks offense is just like, stagnant when Luka or Kyrie doesn't have the ball. That was a very big problem in the entire series, and it really boiled down to stop Luka or stop Kyrie. You stop the Dallas Mavericks, and that cannot happen, because it's like, not only is that, difficult to maintain offensively, but you also have to think about it defensively. I mean, Luka and Kyrie, as guards, as individual guards, they already are notorious for being bad at defense. Like, that's a given. But on top of that, wasting all of their stamina on the offense, it's only going to make playing defense more difficult for them, because they aren't going to have enough breath, and they aren't going to have enough stamina in their lungs to be able to focus on just playing, to be able to focus on the offense and focus on the defense. This is a problem that we've seen LeBron and several other players have, where it's like, we see LeBron's defense sort of decline, not really decline, but like, he becomes a little bit lazier on defense, because it's like, you need him on offense, and he needs his stamina for offense, so he can't be running out and doing all of these kinds of things on the defensive side and making an impact on the defensive side, because you need the impact that he has on the offensive side. Now, more so on the on the free agency, it's gonna be difficult for them to bring in another player in a free agency, which is why I feel like the main key for this Mavericks team to being successful is revamping the offense just a little bit. That includes a little bit more of the players, so that the other players aren't just standing there waiting for the ball to come their way. It's not consistent, it's not reliable. While the Boston Celtics, while they were able to do it with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, while they were able to do it, they had a good enough team to they had a much better team than the Dallas Mavericks had, because while Jason Tatum was struggling throughout a majority of the series, the rest of the players were stepping up. They were hitting their shots. They were making their plays. Drew Holiday was making plays. Kristaps was making plays. All of these other players on the team were making plays. It wasn't just Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, which is like, one of the big reasons why I think this team and this roster as a whole is just, it's just that good. It's Now, that's just one of the issues for this team, the free agency part. Now it's the contract decisions that they have to worry about. Now, from a rotation perspective, Derrick Jones Jr. is the Mavericks' lone player with an expiring contract, and he earned $2.7 million this season, held a starting job, and enjoyed an efficient, productive run in the playoffs. He deserves a raise, but will Dallas end up giving him that raise? That is the question. Markieff Morris, he played just 216 minutes in 26 appearances during the regular season, did not hit the floor in the playoffs. Are they going to keep him on the roster? That's still to be decided. Dante Exum has no guaranteed money for next season, and Jaden Hardy is guaranteed $400,000 of his $2 million. Both of those decisions will be made in June, but they are inexpensive to keep. Now, if the Mavericks want to free space, trading Tim Hardaway Jr. on his expiring $16.2 million deal is likely going to be the first choice from Dallas. And I personally think they should get rid of Tim Hardaway Jr. He provides nothing for the team on the offensive side of the ball, as well as provides nothing for the team on the defensive side of the ball. I've seen him on New York, And while he was valuable for Dallas for a little bit, I don't think they need him now. They need to get rid of him, and they need to bring in some other, not a star player, but some other, player, maybe like a little, maybe other players, not just one, if they even could bring other players. And it depends what they do in the free agency market. But I really feel like they should bring other players, not just other players. Like, just bringing in another option isn't going to make the team any better. Like, they should avoid from getting another big-time free agent on their roster. They should avoid it completely. This problem happened with Brooklyn. This problem happened with LA. This problem happened with Phoenix. It's happened with every team that Kevin Durant has been a part of recently, along with, it happened with LeBron and the Lakers. Shouldn't happen with the Dallas Mavericks. Learn from those mistakes. Don't do that again. Now, the free agents that they should probably pursue, I feel like Royce O'Neal, he might be a really good option for the team. And according to this article, it says that he's a pretty good 3-and-D option as well. He was a good option for the Suns. There's also there's also the possibility of signing a couple of veterans, like Chris Paul, maybe even Kyle Lowry. They both have rings, and they might want to chase for more. Cameron Payne is also a pretty good steal, not to mention Cam Reddish. Those are potential options for free agency, but again, they aren't going to be big-time free agents, which is why this Dallas Mavericks team, they need to be able to revamp their offense just a little bit to sort of make it so that way their offense isn't just completely Luka and Kyrie. That is, I feel like, the big next step for Dallas, because if the team was able to produce as efficiently as they could in every single one of these games because they played, I can't really say that the team played rather well throughout a majority of the postseason, because it was really just Luka and Kyrie doing most of the work 9 out of 10 times. But if they were to find, other options on the team that could give them the boost in scoring that they need, like as a team, however, not just, as an individual player, then that would help the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, in the one game that they were able to win, not only was their defense very, very solid, but the rest of their role players, they were much more solid as well. Hardaway Jr., he ended up getting 15 points. Dante Exum ended up getting 10. Derek Lively ended up getting 11. And, it was just a much better performance coming in from the bench as well. The bench had 54 points compared to some of the other previous games where the bench would only score 16. They scored only 16 in game 3. And the bench, let me see, they only scored 9 in game 2. And then the bench in game 1, they only scored, they scored 20 in game 1. But overall, the bench just wasn't there for this Dallas Mavericks team, and that was one of the biggest problems. And it's just you need the rest of the rest of the team, and you need them to be consistent. Like, I'm not asking for 20 points coming in from a bench player. No, if all of them were to get maybe 7 or 10 at least, you can't be mad at that. That is very consistent, and that will definitely help they just need to produce more as teammates. That's really the big thing. So with that, we are out of time for this third segment. That's what I think is next for Dallas. They're definitely going to run it back. It makes no sense not to run it back. So now we will go ahead and go into the fourth segment, which is going to be about whether or not Jason Tatum was robbed of the Finals MVP, because Jaylen Brown, he was able to win the Finals MVP. So we're just going to talk a little bit about that right after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be looking at Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, their playoff numbers, and we are going to determine whether or not Jason Tatum was robbed of the Finals MVP, whether or not he, whether he deserves it, whether Jaylen Brown deserves it. All of this, we're going to talk about that in this fourth segment. So let me just go ahead and pull up all of their numbers real quick. Well, we already have Jaylen Brown's numbers up on this slide right here, so might as well go ahead and bring that back up. Again, 20 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 44% from the field, 23% from 3, 1.6 steals per game. This Boston Celtics duo, I don't really have it up here, but they became the first duo in NBA history to average 25 and 5, at least both of them to at least average 25 and 5 in the series. Now, that is obviously very impressive, and the argument could have been, either one of these players could have won the Finals MVP. You could flip a coin, and you could pick either one of these players to win the Finals MVP, judging off of their performances. So, let's go ahead and break down their averages. Now, obviously, you see Jaylen Brown's averages on the screen, but Jason Tatum's averages, you might, on paper, they seem to be a lot better. So, Jason Tatum, he ended the game, he averaged 22 points per game, which is better than Jaylen Brown's, averaged 7 assists, again, better than Jaylen Brown, 7 rebounds, again, better than Jaylen Brown, and he shot much better from the free throw line, without a doubt. But then again, Jason Tatum is known to being a much better free throw shooter. Jason Tatum shot way worse from the field compared to Jaylen Brown. And they didn't shoot very well from 3. That is one thing that was constant. Both of those players shot poorly from 3. And another thing that should also be considered is that Jason Tatum, with this finals appearance, he is now the 4th player in NBA history to lead his team in points, rebounds, and assists in the finals and win a title. The other 3 players that have done that are Magic Johnson in 1987, Tim Duncan in 2003, and LeBron James in 2012, and 2013, and 2016, and 2020. You all know that I have to hype up LeBron because LeBron is the greatest basketball player to ever live to ever walk the planet. Plain and simple. And the fact that he's on this list 4 times is nothing short of impressive. 4! And that's all that I really have to say. Again, it's every single time he's won the championship, by the way. So I just wanted to point that out. And now, again, with all this, leading the team in points, leading the team in rebounds, and leading the team in assists, why wasn't he the Finals MVP? Why was it Jaylen Brown? The key is consistency. Now, I'm going to explain why I think it wasn't Jaylen Brown. So, Game 1, Jason Tatum, he ended with 16 points and 6 turnovers, along with 11 rebounds and 5 assists, shooting 37% from the field, 6 for 16, 3 for 7 from 3. Now, that is a very, very bad way to open up the series. I'm sorry to say it, that is not a good way to open up the series. Jaylen Brown, on the other hand, opened up the series. Oh, wait, I should also mention. No, I won't mention that. Jaylen Brown, he opened up the series scoring 22 points. He didn't get better, overall stats, but he was putting the ball in the hoop at a very efficient rate, getting 22 points and going 7 for 12 from the field, 58%, and 2 for 6 from 3. Now, while I will say that the three-point shooting was it wasn't that efficient, considering, his standards, I'm not going to sit here and say that finals performance, that Game 1, wasn't a good Game 1. I mean, 22 points on 50+% shooting, that is fantastic. And while he didn't get much, he didn't get that many assists or that many rebounds, he was able to get 3 blocks, and he was also able to get 3 steals in this game, which, again, brings value. Now, Game 2, Jason Tatum. He ended the game with 18 points, 12 assists, and 9 rebounds. Again, he's filling up the stat sheets pretty well. Now, the big problem here in this game for him, 6 for 22 from the field. That's 27%, and 1 for 7 from 3, which was 14% from 3, and only 18 points. Now, Jaylen Brown, 21 points, and 8 for 15 from the field, 53%. And while he didn't have the total counting stats, he only had 4 rebounds and 7 assists. He was putting the ball in the hoop. And I really and not only was he putting the ball in the hoop, he was doing it at an efficient rate, at a much more efficient rate than Jason Tatum in the first few games. And as much as, the other stats are really important, you win the game by putting the ball in the hoop. Now, we go on to game 3, and I'm breaking all of these down individually. So you have 31 from Jason Tatum, 5 assists coming from him as well, along with 6 rebounds, shooting 11 for 26 and 4 of 13 from 3, which is 42% from the field and 30% from 3. Next, we have Jaylen Brown's numbers. Now, he ended the game with 30 points as well, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, 12 for 22, 54% shooting, and 2 of 9 from 3. Now, I'm not going to say that either one of those players had a better game than the other, because they both did their part and they both played phenomenally. And Jason Tatum, he was putting the ball in the hoop and he was doing everything else with that as well. So that's the first good game, the first very good statement game that Jason Tatum has had in the postseason, because while the rest of the counting stats are very good, he's been quiet throughout a majority of the postseason. He was quiet throughout the entirety of the postseason, and then in game 4, when they all got blown the heck out by the Mavericks, he ended with a box plus minus of minus 33. That is one of the worst box plus minus scores that an all-NBA player has ever accumulated in the NBA Finals. And he owns 2 of the top 3 worst box plus minus scores in the NBA Finals. Now, while he did get, better stats than Jaylen Brown, and in this game, that doesn't matter, because every single time he was on the court, the team was getting outscored, and he wasn't doing anything. And the minus 33 box score, that's not Finals MVP material. I'm sorry, I'm not going to give the Finals MVP to somebody who is shooting horribly from the field and is just recorded one of the worst box plus minuses by an all-NBA player in the history of the league. That's just not happening. No. Then game 5, which was the final game of the series, this was really this was what made the Finals MVP discussion competitive. Because in the closeout game, Jason Tatum finally stepped up, 31 points again, 11 assists, 8 rebounds, and he ended up leading the team in scoring for the rest of the series. But that was mainly because Jaylen Brown, he didn't really have that wow performance in a closeout game. He ended with 21 points, but he shot 7 for 23 from the field. And it was much more of a team effort than it was Jason Tatum being a dominant player, which was the big difference, because it's not like they were trying to fight their way to the win and Jason Tatum was the leading scorer. The team, it was a blowout win, so you could argue that the numbers, they aren't really that. I'm not going to say that 31 points in a closeout game isn't that impressive, but there isn't that much pressure on you scoring all of those points when you're up by so much and when Dallas is just laying over and taking it. That's just my opinion, however, and that's sort of why I think Jaylen Brown deserved the Finals MVP, because when you look at it from game to game to game, if you look at it from a game-to-game standpoint and you don't look at the averages, Jaylen Brown was putting the ball in the hoop. He was much more valuable for the team, while Jason Tatum was being the playmaker for the team. It seemed like he was being the playmaker mainly because he wasn't putting the ball in the hoop, and he had to find a way to help the team somehow, and he did. And that's how they won the championship. It's plain and simple. Now, I don't want to discredit the rest of these players for winning, but I'm just saying that it's like, Jason Tatum, I don't think he was robbed. I genuinely don't think he was robbed. And I honestly don't think he cares whether or not he wins the Finals MVP or not. Because like Kobe didn't win the Finals MVP in his first ever Finals. So if that's enough for him. But with that, we are out of time for this fourth segment. So now we will be going into a much shorter segment than usual, talking about Luka Doncic and the possibility of him playing for Slovenia in the Paris Olympics. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned. And we are back to the fifth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And I did say we were going to talk about whether or not Luka is going to be playing in the Olympics, but I am canceling that. So this is going to be the topic that we're actually going to talk about for the fifth segment, and that is, hold on just one second. Ta-da! There you go. For those of you on the audio side, you guys have no idea what I'm saying, what I just did, but I changed the title from Luka Doncic and playing with Slovenia to JJ Redick is the Lakers head coach. It was just determined 20 minutes ago, and it was just like all the reports, I'm getting all of them right now, that JJ Redick is like the Lakers, they're going to hire JJ Redick, and he's going to be the next head coach for the Lakers. This was according to Anthony Irwin of LA on Twitter and or on X, however you want to call it. I said Twitter, and it seems like that's going to be the next move for. This was tweeted an hour ago. This was again according to Anthony Irwin from LA, so it's not from Woj. So maybe it's not entirely like it's not set in stone, but according to this source, the deal is done. And JJ Redick is going to be the next head coach for the Lakers. Now, I feel like this is obviously this is more so of like a breaking news thing, because it's like literally the second the championship was decided, they were like, oop, time to hire. And again, like not the Celtics. Why am I talking about the Celtics? But the Lakers and getting JJ Redick, they went from getting him to being really hyped for him. Then they went to seeing another option being available and being more hyped about that. Then they went on to being less hype about JJ Redick, and now it seems like there's a lot of negative notion and a negative reaction on hiring JJ, despite the fact that the Lakers and the fans, they were really content about hiring him at the start. Now, it's obviously, it could be just, the Lakers media where they like to, flip-flop between good and bad. Everyone thought that the Westbrook scenario was good, then it ended up being bad. Everyone thought that this trade was good, then it ended up being bad. Everyone thought that the Kyrie trade was going to happen, ended up being bad. All of these things ended up playing a, they all happen with the Lakers, and they all happen with the Lakers market and the Lakers media. And it's like, it's really not. I don't like it when the media does this with the Lakers, and I don't like it when the fans do it like all the time. It's really like, ugh, I'm just not a big fan of it. But that's just me. Now, another thing that needs to be like known about this is that like the JJ Redick, he has zero coaching experience. Like this is just this doesn't really, and I'm looking at a lot of I'm looking at Twitter right now, and all of the comments, it seems like, everyone is just not happy with JJ Redick being the new coach. Even though they were really hyping him up as being a pretty good coach and like, having a really good basketball mind before they had, that option of being able to bring in UConn's coach. And it's like, it's just, where do the Lakers go from here? That's really the ultimate question. Where do the Lakers go from here? And let me just see real quick. I'm again still looking at Twitter. Now, until this is really like, reported by Woj, I'm a little bit skeptical, but it seems like this is literally like this is a done deal and it's going to happen. At least according to this source from Anthony Irwin from LA. That is, again, it's a possibility. Now, if it's true, we'll find out from Woj. But like again, like this article in this report, it just popped up, bam, like immediately. And it also came from Sideline Sources as well, another one of those pages that I do trust handling with the news. They also handled the news on Jeff Van Gundy this was actually most recent news, but Jeff Van Gundy is now going to be the lead assistant to Tyronn Lue's coaching staff, which is also like this was reported before Woj ended up reporting this. So it's like I'm not really I think this source is rather credible. Now, I'm looking at the people in the comments. Lil Fettuccini was saying that Dallas was shooting way too many threes from last night, and well, no, you need to take those threes because it's like you can make those threes. It's like you live or you die by the 3-point line, and I don't really have a problem with a team taking too many threes because it's like you just got to make them. It's that simple. Now, JJ should stick to podcasting. I do think that he should stick to podcasting as well. Am I doing any coverage on Olympic basketball? Yes, I will definitely be looking at the Olympics. I will be talking all about them, and I will be screaming my head off as Caitlin Clark is not part of Team USA, but you take the good from the bad. Thank the Lord that we have Embiid on the roster. So I definitely will be covering Olympic basketball throughout this off season. Thankfully, there is basketball in this off season because I'm very excited for the Olympics. Even though I wish Jalen Brunson was on the Olympics, and I wish other players were on the Olympics as opposed to Tyrese Halliburton, for example. I would have I'm gonna like the Olympics. They're gonna be fun. Now, back to Redick and this this coaching dilemma. I find it very odd how it's like everybody, like most of the opinions were really positive in the beginning. Now they're very negative, and I don't understand like what side of the coin are we on, because it's like everyone was saying that he has a great basketball mind. Now everyone is pointing to the lack of an experience, despite the fact that he still has that same basketball mind. So it's like, what's the move here? Like where are we going from here with these comments? But let me know what you guys think about JJ Redick. If you guys think that, obviously we know what Lil Fettuccini in the chat thinks about JJ, but we still don't know what everyone else thinks about JJ. Do you think that he is he a better option than Darvin Ham? Is will the lack of coaching experience, will it really be that much of an issue? Because if you remember, Joe Mazzulla, this is I believe he's the youngest coach to ever win a championship in the NBA, and that was the first time on the job for him. Granted, he was coaching the Boston Celtics, which are an elite organization and an elite basketball team, so, might put a little bit of asterisks on there, that, but regardless, success could happen to anyone, and it's really it comes down to it will ultimately come down to luck, and it'll also, because luck plays a part in a lot of these things. Like, a little bit, just a little bit. Like, you always have to have some kind of luck. And who knows? Maybe JJ Redick will bring that luck, or maybe he will bring that not really, like, obviously he won't bring that coaching experience, but maybe he'll bring some of that NBA knowledge to the table. And, you know, we'll just have to see in the future. But I wouldn't count my chickens before the eggs. And I also wouldn't, what's the phrase? I forgot the phrase, but I wouldn't really doubt JJ just because of his lack of experience. Because you have no idea how good somebody is at a job until they've tried it. So I feel like you need to give him, you need to give him a minute to see if he actually can do it. And then we make the assumptions. But making them before, maybe it's not always the best case, because like I've done before, I thought that this duo between Luka and Kyrie, it wasn't going to work, yet here we are. Well, you could argue that maybe it didn't work, but making it to the finals, I think it ultimately paid off a much better result than what I thought was going to be the payoff from this duo. So in a way, you could say it definitely does work, and it worked a lot better than the duo in Brooklyn. That's for sure. So really, like, that's we just have to wait and see. So that's all I have for this fifth segment, and that is going to be it for the podcast. So thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. That is all I have for you on this segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that